At 62, Robert thought his best days were behind him. His joints ached, his energy was gone, and worst of all, his doctor blamed his private habits for his failing health. But when a chance encounter with an old friend led him to a hidden truth about the mind-body connection, everything changed. Because what Robert didn't know, his body wasn't breaking down, it was begging for healing. The first time Robert noticed the sharp pain in his lower back, he brushed it off. Just aging, his doctor said, handing him another prescription. But the pills only fogged his mind. Then came the fatigue. Mornings where dragging himself out of bed felt like lifting bricks. His wife Linda whispered about stress, but Robert knew it was more. One rainy Tuesday he ran into Jack, his college roommate, at the grocery store. Jack, 65 but moving like a man half his age, grinned. "You look like you've been wrestling ghosts, Rob." Robert forced a laugh. "Just getting old." Jack's smile faded. "Bull. You're starving your body's energy. Ever heard of somatic release?" Robert scoffed, grating against Robert's nerves. "So what? I'm sick because I didn't bawl at my sister's funeral?" Jack's gaze dropped to Robert's trembling hands. "Partly. But it's also the shame." The word hung between them like a live wire. Robert's throat tightened. He'd never told anyone about the guilt that gnawed at him, how he'd been too drunk to drive Jenny to the hospital that night, how he'd lied about it for decades. Across the room, a toddler dropped a toy, wailing. Robert crossed his arms. "Jack says you unlock trauma. How's that work?" Maya handed him a glass of water. "When we suppress emotions, the body tenses to contain them. Over time, that tension becomes pain." She tapped her pen against a spine model. "Your lower back's a vault. We're going to open it." Robert scoffed but lay on the table, stiff as a board. Maya's hands hovered inches above his body. "No touching yet." "Feel any heat here?" she asked near his ribs. A sudden wave of warmth flooded his side. Robert jerked. "How do you?" "Energy follows attention," she interrupted. "Now close your eyes and describe Jenny's voice." The demand blindsided him. "What?" "Her laugh. High or low?" Robert swallowed. "Low. Like she'd smoked since 12. A pressure built behind his sternum. Maya's fingers grazed his shoulder, light as a moth, and his breath hitched. "The night she died," Maya murmured. "What's the first thing you said when you woke up?" Robert's muscles locked. He told the cops he'd been asleep when Jenny got sick. Never mentioned the whiskey. Never admitted he'd slurred. "You're overreacting," when she begged for the air. A cramp seized his back, white-hot, just as Maya pressed 2 fingers below his right scapula. "Breathe into it." The pain crested, then dissolved like sugar in water. Robert's eyelids fluttered. For 3 decades he'd carried that moment like a stone in his shoe. Now tears streamed into his ears. Maya didn't react. "The guilt isn't yours to carry anymore," she said simply. When Robert sat up, the room tilted. His back hadn't felt this loose since his 20s. Maya scribbled notes. "Next time we address the shame around pleasure." Robert froze. "What?" She glanced at his wedding ring. "Your sexual energy's stagnant. The body doesn't distinguish between types of repression." The clock ticked loudly. Robert stood too fast, knees popping. "There won't be a next time." Maya just smiled. "Your pain will be back by Tuesday." As he fumbled for his wallet, Robert's phone buzzed, Linda's photo flashing. He declined the call. The last thing he saw exiting was Maya's business card taped to her door. Healing isn't about fixing. It's about feeling. Outside, the sun glared. Robert's back didn't hurt, but his hand shook worse than ever. Wednesday morning, Robert was popping painkillers like breath mints. Maya's prediction had been dead on. The agony returned with a vengeance, crawling up his spine like electric vines the moment he woke. He told himself it was just the weather changing. Then Linda found the receipt for the session in his jacket pocket. "What the hell is somatic trauma release?" she demanded over breakfast, waving the crumpled paper. Robert's coffee turned to acid in his stomach. "Physical therapy," he lied. Linda's eyes narrowed. She'd been a nurse for 20 years. "Bullshit. Your therapist has a Yelp page calling her a witch doctor." The toaster popped loudly, making them both flinch. Robert opened his mouth to confess, but what came out was, You think I enjoy being broken? Linda's face crumpled. That's when the doorbell rang. Jack stood on the porch holding 2 fishing rods. Doc says I need vitamin D. You're driving. The escape was so blatant it was almost funny. In the truck, Robert white-knuckled the wheel while Jack stared at his shaking hands. Maya got to you, huh? Robert's jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. She's full of crap. I cried like a baby and still wound up worse. Jack snorted. You think one good cry erases 30 years? The highway stretched ahead, sun glinting off asphalt. You know why I really quit drinking? Jack said suddenly. Not for my liver. Because every time I got wasted, I'd see my dad's face when I told him I was gay. Robert's foot slipped on the gas. Jack had never mentioned this. Your body punishes secrets, Jack said quietly. The lake was glassy smooth. They sat in silence for an hour, lines in the water. Until Robert's phone buzzed. A voicemail from Maya. Against all logic, he played it on speaker. Her voice cut through the birdsong. Mr. Carter, your blood work showed elevated cortisol levels consistent with chronic shame. This isn't metaphysical. It's endocrinology. Come back or don't. But stop lying to your wife. The message ended. A fish jumped, rippling the water. Jack didn't look at him. You gonna tell her about Jenny? Robert's vision blurred. The truth was a boulder in his throat. That night, he found Linda in the garden, deadheading roses. I need to say something, he began. She snapped a thorny stem. If it's another lie, save it. The scent of crushed petals hung heavy between them. Robert reached for her shears. To help or to stall, he wasn't sure, and the blade nicked his palm. Blood welled, shockingly red. Linda gasped, but Robert just stared. For the first time in years, he felt something. Blood dripped onto the rosebush as Linda rushed to grab a towel. But Robert just stood there watching the crimson streaks trickle down his wrist, fascinated by how alive it made him feel. Damn it, Robert, apply pressure. Linda yelled, but her voice sounded distant, like he was underwater. The sharp sting in his palm anchored him to the present in a way nothing had in years. When she pressed the towel against his hand, he finally spoke. I killed Jenny. Linda froze. What? The words tumbled out now, the drinking, the refusal to drive, the way he downplayed her symptoms until it was too late. She begged me to take her to the hospital, and I told her she was being dramatic. His knees gave out, and suddenly he was kneeling in the dirt, sobs racking his body. Linda sank down beside him, her face pale. All these years, you never told me? Robert shook his head violently. How could I? You loved her too. A cicada droned in the silence that followed. Then Linda did something unexpected. She laughed, a broken, wet sound. You arrogant bastard, she whispered. You think you're the only one who blames themselves? She wiped her eyes with a dirty garden glove. I was the nurse. I should have recognized the signs when we saw her last. But I was too busy judging her lifestyle to see she was dying. Robert stared at her. This truth was a grenade between them. They'd both been carrying their own versions of the same guilt. The cut on his hand throbbed, but his back pain had vanished again like flipping a switch. Linda noticed it too. You're standing straighter, she murmured. They sat there in the dirt as the sunset painted everything orange, the rose thorns catching the light like tiny knives. That night, for the first time in decades, Robert dreamed of Jenny. Not the gasping, dying version burned into his memory, but the messy, laughing sister who'd stolen his cigarettes when they were teens. He woke at 3 a.m. with tears drying on his cheeks and an impossible lightness in his chest. The digital clock cast a red glow over Linda sleeping beside him. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, the one still smudged with his blood from earlier. Her fingers tightened around his in her sleep. Somewhere in the house, a pipe creaked. Robert lay awake until dawn, waiting for the pain to return. It never did. The morning sun filtered through the curtains as Robert stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at his reflection, really staring, for the first time in years. The deep lines on his face no longer just told stories of age, but of pain he'd carried like a second skeleton. Downstairs, Linda was humming as she made coffee, a sound he hadn't heard in so long it almost hurt. He pressed his palm against the mirror, over the reflection of his heart, and took a slow breath. The last of the tension melted away like morning frost. That afternoon, they drove to Jenny's grave together. Robert knelt in the grass, fingers brushing the cold stone, and finally said the words he'd choked on for 30 years. "I'm sorry." A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying with it the faintest hint of gardenia jenny's scent. Linda squeezed his shoulder, her wedding band warm against his skin. That night, for the first time in decades, Robert reached for his wife not out of habit, but because he wanted to feel alive. And when their bodies connected, it wasn't the desperate, mechanical act it had become. It was slow, present, real. Afterward, Linda traced the scar on his palm, the one from the rose thorns, and whispered, "We're allowed to be happy, you know." Robert pulled her closer, his back pain-free, his breath steady. The digital clock blinked midnight. Somewhere outside, an owl called. And for once, the silence didn't feel like emptiness, it felt like peace. Moral lesson: the body never lies. It carries every unspoken grief, every buried shame. Not to punish you, but to remind you that healing begins when you stop running from yourself. True health isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to face what caused it. Whether it's guilt, trauma, or repressed joy, your cells remember what your mind tries to forget. Listen to them.